All right, this week we are talking about Chapter 25. This will lead into the Unit 2 test this at the end of this week. And so hopefully what we can do is, since we've covered Chapters 21 through 25, is the questions will really be over more about themes that we've seen rather than specific concepts, if that makes sense. So more of the themes that we see running through these four chapters, and to be able to look at some of the things that we've talked about. But hopefully you'll be able to do that. We've already had one test, and it'll be exactly the same, 4 questions, essay style, 50 points each for 200 points maximum. But hopefully you'll see that. Let's talk about the themes this week that you're going to see in Chapter 25. Chapter 25 goes through a couple of things, 4 themes that I want to make sure that you're aware of. One is nativism. After World War I and the breakdown of society, or what a lot of Americans feel like is the breakdown of society, they start to look at who was here first, and nativism. Well, I've been here longer than you, and they start to look at immigration policy and not allowing immigrants to come into the country. They are nervous of socialism, communism, anarchism, anything that could destroy the American fabric. And so they're trying to find ways that they can keep those people out. So if you've been here long enough, you're okay. If you are just coming into this country, we need to look at you under a microscope. And that is the idea of nativism, which you're going to see in this chapter. The Jazz Age is one that I have you reading this in this chapter. The Jazz Age is interesting, and I think that you should spend some time on Marcus Garvey if you get a chance. He's flamboyant. One of my favorite characters from the Jazz Age, who I think is the Jazz Age in and of itself is fabulous. But you get the Harlem Renaissance that comes out of the Jazz Age. A lot of good music that comes out of this, obviously, but really this leads to several other artistic people who come out. T.S. Eliot, F. Scott Fitzgerald, who start writing about this time period as well. And I think that the Jazz Age is one that you should be familiar with and be able to understand, especially in the way that Marcus Garvey looks at it, which is that we need to be looking at Black culture and maybe the first Black nationalist movement at this point in time. I think that you could make a case for other Black nationalist movements, but I think that the 60s Black national movement that is a direct correlation to this movement here, and the idea of Black culture being something that should be studied and looked at. Reactionary mood. After World War I, Americans are nervous about what's going on, and they are really afraid that with the war, with women getting the vote, that it is going to destroy the American fabric. And so they're really afraid that it's going to destabilize families, that scientific scholarship may hurt their religious views, something that we see a lot today, especially with the conservative right and some of the worries that they have. This all culminates in the Scopes trial in Tennessee, which I find fascinating, with the idea of teaching evolution in schools and what we could do to do there. If you get a chance, spend some time looking at the Scopes trial and understanding that. I think it's fascinating in that it really reflects a broader idea of people just being really nervous about science, religion, and equality, and what that would do to the family. Lastly is this idea of modernism. The idea of modernism and modern expression leads us to modern art and expressionist art, which isn't really a crazy idea, but I think that people had lost their ideal view of America, and so now they're looking for it in other ways that it can't be. It's not logical. You can't look at it through reason. Really, what we need to be doing is looking at maybe my own idea of ideal. or looking at things through a different lens or a different perspective. And this idea of modernism comes out of that. You get art and poetry, and it all stems around disillusionment. To be honest with you, I think that we may potentially be in another modernist era at this point in time, where people are reaching outside of the box to find art and poetry that reflects how they're feeling today, that it's not all roses and candy out there, that it's more difficult than we think. And this idea is coming out of this time period in the 1920s after World War I. And so we're going to see another bit of this as we move into the 60s as well. I mean, as we've seen, hopefully as you've seen to this point, is that we see this ebb and flow back and forth between the ideal to disillusionment and back and forth. And so hopefully you'll get to see that, and you'll see these themes this week as we move forward to the chapter or the Unit 2 test. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I look forward to getting the test up and having you take that. And if you have any questions, call me. Thanks a lot. Have a good week.